It really was impromptu, but I thought, you know, I'll share a small part of my enthusiasms with you. And if you read about it in the Times or the Guardian or something like that over the next few months, you'll say, hey, I heard that guy talk about it. My partner and I, in 1985, bought a company called Films Around the World, which has been around since 1930. And we're in the independent part of the movie business. We bought a film library, which we built up. And the first deal we did was we licensed 50 out of 179 movies to Sony for more than we paid for the whole thing. I said, what a wonderful business to be in, okay? It was like discovering sex at age 50. So we went looking for something else. And we stumbled across a closed down, semi-defunct company that was a whole bunch of boxes and filing cabinets in a warehouse in Providence, Rhode Island. It was public, it was non-reporting, and we bought it for stock, so we figured we had nothing to lose, whatever it is. They had a library of prime-time television programs that were the heart of NBC's prime-time lineup back in the 50s. You've heard about this stuff, nobody has seen it. Put that aside, I'm not going to talk about that stuff. That's enthusiasm number one. Anyway, we shipped everything down to the basement of the Quad Theater in Manhattan, which we were subleasing 3,000 square feet, until one day in 1999, the owner of the Quad, Mr. Kambar, says, Cogen, you're paying $500 a month for 3,000 feet. I want my space back. I said, okay, we'll get out. And because every movie has 3 or 4 or 5 different titles, it was really all in my head. This was sort of before computers were really catching on and PCs and so on. So it was all kind of primitive. So I went in the basement with a crew, and we're inventorying stuff and packing it up and shipping it out. We finally get to the back of this warehouse, and we find box after box after box after box of radio tapes, quarter-inch reel-to-reel magnetic tapes that have been perfectly stored. And that was when I realized that included as part of the deal, we owned a radio production and syndication company. There ended up being 2,500 hours of tapes. Some of the shows are well known, Gene Shepard, Joe Pine, Barry Farber, Barry Gray. Some of them are kind of obscure, but the one I'm going to tell you about, the one that's absolutely fascinating to me, it turns out that in 1964 to 67, a subsidiary that came as part of the deal co-produced with the BBC a live radio series. It was an export series. It was never, ever, ever heard in Europe. In fact, I don't think it was heard anywhere outside the United States. It's unbelievable, but if you Google the Top of the Pops, am I on? The Top of the Pops radio series, nothing comes up. It has absolutely disappeared from living memory. Now, I didn't know what to do with reel-to-reel tapes, so I sent some out to my expert. He took some tapes, stuck some of them on a little cassette, and that was when I realized that one of the series, the Top of the Pops, had the Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks and the Animals and on and on and on. So people would say, well, it must be worth a lot of money. But people would say, well, what do you have? You have to catalog it. So I went on eBay, I bought an antique TEDx, it's about this big, a reel-to-reel recorder player. We hooked it up to a Mac, we figured it out, and I hired a rock musician who lives, breathes this stuff. They have Gaz has a radio show called Atlantic Tunnel on internet radio out in the village somewhere. Anyway, it took 3 years because you had to take the tape, put it on, listen to it, then you had to look up which were the songs, who wrote the songs, has it been released before, you try and figure all this out. About 6 or 8 months ago, we finished the catalog. And it turns out we have 1,200 live songs, never heard in this format since they were recorded in 1964 to 67. The BBC did make disc copies, transcription disc copies, which are much, much lower quality than the tapes. The tapes are 0 to 12 kilohertz, and the discs are 7 to 8 kilohertz. Whatever that means, it means that it sounds a lot better if you have the tape. Turned out to be 180 groups, 1,200 songs, interviews of the groups. The catalog starts with Acker Bilk, and it goes all the way down to Zoot Money and his Pinkerton Band. In between, the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, the Animals, Dusty Springfield, Tom Jones, on and on and on and on. We have an hour and 20 minutes of Beatles materials, about a half hour of interviews backstage at the 1964 US-Canada tour. And then there's 12 songs. Of the 12 songs, as far as we can tell, 3 have never been released in these versions. So, I mean, we're not fools. We're in discussions with 3 of the 4 major labels in the world, and one of them is hot to trot. We did bring in a reporter we brought in as part of the deal, a fellow who managed the Beatles, Peter Brown. He was with Brian Epstein, and then he took over management and formed Apple Corps. And now we have some other heavyweights involved. So so far, no story has been written, but the reporter from the Times did say he'd never heard these interviews. So I'm sharing with you my enthusiasm. It's a great story. You may read about it in the next 6 months, or you may say, whatever happened to that guy with all that stuff? I will tell you, it is fascinating to hear Ringo and Paul and the others discussing, what are you going to do, Ringo? Well, we're going to paint Buckingham Palace. You're going to paint the palace what? It says black with green shutters. They're clowning around, they're fooling around. We think it's great stuff. At least one major label thinks it's great stuff too, and maybe it will happen, maybe not. There's a lot of problems with clearances and rights, mechanical licenses. I mean, nothing's as simple as it sounds, but it is absolutely pristine. That's my enthusiasm, that's my story. If you read about it, you'll say, I heard that guy in East Hampton. Thank you.